He was called the bravest man alive, and for good reason. From record-breaking jumps to record-breaking flights, he's done it all in aviation. And now this former prisoner of war has accomplished his proudest moment with a tribute to his fellow Vietnam veterans. Today on Central Florida Spotlight. Hi, I'm Greg Wormuth at Colonel Joe Kittinger Park near Orlando Executive Airport, and behind me, a Phantom F-4. It was recently dedicated as a memorial to Vietnam veterans. The project was led by Colonel Joe Kittinger, who actually grew up in Orlando. And as a little boy, he came to this very piece of land. You could say it's where his dream of flying started.
It was my field of dreams. And I'd go there for one purpose, that's to look at airplanes. I watched them take off, landing, try to meet the pilot. And that's where I really set a goal in my life to be a pilot. And I pursued that goal and I reached it. And I'm still flying today.
After becoming an Air Force test pilot, he volunteered for a project to prepare man to fly in space.
He made a contribution to the space program. The other thing we did was research on escape from very high altitude. And I did a jump from 102,800 feet to prove that we could get an astronaut or a pilot back from high altitude. The greatest event in my life was jumping from 102,800 feet. Nobody had ever been up there that high. Nobody had ever done it. So it was something, a record that I held for 52 years, which is amazing when you think about it, to set any record and have it last that long.
Joe served 3 tours in Vietnam and was the squadron commander of a fighter group flying missions into North Vietnam. As commander, he led younger pilots into aerial combat.
I put myself on a schedule in the alert shack. I never had any idea that I'd be scrambled. And that evening at about 9 o'clock, the siren rang, which meant we had to scramble. Ran out, jumped in the airplane, took off, and there was a MiG that was coming into the Laos area, and they directed me toward the MiG, and I shot him down. And that was my first MiG. And that was my goal was to shoot down 5, because that's what every fighter pilot looks to be an ace. So I had 4 more to go. On the 11th of May, 1972, I was chasing the MiG, and I could already see that star on my airplane that I was going to shoot down. I was just about getting to the point where I was almost about 99% sure it was a MiG, when the world's greatest fighter pilot on the other side snuck up my rear end and shot me down. That started the worst day of my life, where I landed in North Vietnam, about 30 miles northwest of Hanoi, and started my TDY service as a POW in Hanoi. I was with 550 other Americans that had the same goal, was to return home with honor, and we did.
Runway 7, clear for takeoff.
After the Air Force, Joe returned to Orlando and illustrated the skies above with skywriting and balloon advertising for Church Street Station. Church Street was the launch pad for many of his worldwide balloon adventures and record attempts.
The work I did in the Air Force, there was a specific reason for it. There was a scientific reason. There was information that we needed for the future. When I flew across the Atlantic in a balloon, that was just for the hell of it. I did it as an adventure. I did it because it had never been done before. We had some objectives, was first of all to set records. We did that. First person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, we did that. And the third thing was to have a good time, and we did that.
Many had attempted to beat Kittinger's long-standing high-altitude records over the years. One group even convinced him to join their project in planning to break his own records.
When I made my jump in 1960, for the next 50 years, I had people call me from all over the world, wanting me to help them to beat my record. I really wasn't interested because none of them had the experience. They didn't have the support, didn't have the finances. They had no idea what a pressure suit was used for. And I didn't want to be involved in anything when someone would get killed. So I turned them all down until Red Bull. And when they came along, I was convinced that they wanted to do it for a good reason and that they would do it in a safe manner. So I joined their team. In 2012, Felix went up to 138,000 feet, jumped out of the balloon, and went supersonic. I went 847 miles an hour and set a new world's record that will stand for quite a while. The most gratifying part of it was that we accomplished some scientific objectives. We flight tested the next generation full pressure suit. The next time man goes into space outside of a spacecraft, he's going to take advantage of what we learned on this new pressure suit that Felix jumped. The second thing we did was we came up with an advanced physiological monitoring system that would tell the doctors on the ground how the person was doing in the environment he was at. The third thing was man had never on supersonic the way that we were measuring it. So there were a lot of scientific objectives that we were after in the program, and we accomplished all of them.
And he's down on the earth safely back.
Two jets go so fast, faster than any plane in the world.
Igniting the spark in future pilots and scientists is his primary motivation today. And this is what Joe is talking about. This is 4-year-old Judah Stanley, who you could see enjoyed dreaming of what it must be like to fly a Phantom F4.
Safe clear, Joe!
To me, the most important thing for young people is to set a goal, work toward it, and never give up. Never, never, never. And I think that's the reason why I was successful, because I never gave up on any of the projects that I was working on. And to me, the real success, the real methods I want to tell the young people is to establish goals, work on them, and don't worry about what your peers say, don't worry about peer pressure. Just set your own goal, your own mind, what you want to do, and work toward that goal.
Up next, we'll hear from folks already touched by just the sight of this plane. Welcome back to Colonel Joe Kittinger Park near Orlando Executive Airport. As you can see, this Phantom F4 has been returned to its beautiful glory through a great restoration project that really was painstaking. So why do this project here, and why do it now?
This monument is a welcome home for the Vietnam veterans from Central Florida. The message is, welcome home, thank you for your service, thank you for representing our nation in that war. As you leave the International Airport, on the left side of the road, there's a sign there that says, welcome home, veterans. The veterans that came back from Vietnam didn't have that sign there. The veterans that came home from Vietnam were not given the treatment and the respect they deserved. The country was very divided. It was a very bad time in the history of our nation. And the liberal media and Jane Fonda got the American public to be critical of veterans, when really the veterans were just soldiers doing what soldiers always did, and that whatever the job is to maintain our country. The Vietnam War was a disaster because of politicians, not soldiers.
The Phantom F4 jet is symbolic of the Vietnam War for our troops on the ground and the pilots in the air.
I've had people come up to me who were in the Army and Marines that said they're alive today because of the support they got from the F4. The F4 Phantom was the most versatile airplane in the Vietnam War. The F4 Phantom was used more than any other airplane in support of ground forces, in support of bombing strategic and tactical targets in South Vietnam, North Vietnam, and Laos. It was also the airplane that escorted B-52 bombers. And it was also the airplane that went over Hanoi and kept the skies clear of MiG aircraft. So it was a very versatile airplane, and it was the airplane that people respected because of the versatility of it.
Sam Lasseter shot these home movies of the actual plane on display in the park. He worked as an F4 crew chief during the Vietnam War.
I launched and recovered, pre-flighted, bomb loads, missile loads, everything with every airplane in the group, and this plane was in our group. This airplane, since it was in our section and since I worked on it so many times, it's personal to me. It almost brought tears to my eyes. For those that were involved, special memories. This is memories forever. They're not all good, but it's still special memories forever. And to be able to see and witness something like this over 40 years later, it's hard to put in words.
To the refugees who fled Vietnam, this plane is a symbol of their new freedom.
I came from Vietnam. I'm a boat people. I came directly here after the war. I grew up there when I was young. Came here like 21, 22 years old. So the entire war, I witnessed everything. When we first came here, we don't know nothing about, hey, what's going on with the American. After you got to know more about Vietnam War, not only from our side of the history, and then we found out about the American public toward the Vietnam War. We see some injustice there. Now our children are grew up. We basically dedicate our life to honor the veterans. Anything look like contribute to the Vietnam War and fought for our freedom, I want to be part of that. Colonel Kittinger is a United States Air Force officer, so I can see this is celebrate his life. He's a local hero. He's our hero, Set a good role model for our young. Look up after him. I mean, come back to the same town and help the city, make it more beautiful. Oh yeah, perfect.
Up next, the countless man hours to do this. We'll show you how it got started from minute one. Welcome back to Joe Kittinger Park near Orlando Executive Airport. This Phantom F-4 actually flew missions over Vietnam. Now, some 40 years after the war, it's been completely restored, and it was done so in record time.
I got $100, now two, now three.
After years in the making, the project took off with a fundraiser to raise money and build a team to restore the plane.
We raised $30,000, and that was enough money to start the project. We went to the Air Force and convinced them we had enough money to start the program. We were number 30 on the list. But when we had our fundraiser, we went back to the Air Force and said, okay, we've got the money now that we needed to do the project. So we went from number 30 on the list to number 1 on the list. The airplane had been on a college campus at Corsicana, Texas for 11 years. The airplane needed paint badly. It needed TLC. The college decided they no longer wanted to have the aircraft on display. So that was the airplane that we were given.
Oh, Joe. Good to see you.
And Shirley and I went to Corsicana. We had a company come in there, dismantle the aircraft, put it on flatbeds, and 2 flatbeds drove the airplane from Corsicana, Texas to Orlando, Florida. And when it got into Orlando, Channel 9 had a helicopter overboard following the flatbed through Orlando out to Executive Airport. It was exciting because we had worked for a couple of years for that moment that we were finally getting our airplane. And it was exciting to all of us that our dream was finally coming true, and there was the airplane showing up at Executive. And now I must tell you that the real coincidence is that the airplane had been in my squadron in Vietnam. The airplane was assigned to my squadron, and I actually flew the airplane on 4 combat missions in North Vietnam. So this airplane was an old friend. It had been in my fighter squadron in Vietnam. After the Vietnam War was over in '73, they transferred the airplane to England, to RAF Lakenheath, where I ended up going there as the vice wing commander in 1974. So I flew that same airplane in England. So this airplane is an old friend. And it was just happenstance. It was just coincidence that I ended up getting an airplane that was an old friend.
Structural integrity is more important to me than the aesthetics.
We put together a team, and the team was fantastic. We had engineers, we had construction people, we had 60 different companies from Orlando that volunteered pro bono to help put this airplane on a pedestal in my park.
We thought we were going to have to paint the airplane, and you run into a lot of issues when it comes to painting. First of all, you have environmental problems because people don't want paint that's permeating the skies, and you need a paint booth. It was going to cost $30,000 to paint the airplane, and 3M donated the wrap, which is plastic material like a film, and they print the design into the film. Same colors and the same insignia and the same numbers as Joe flew when he flew the F-4 in Vietnam. The airplane just looks like it should be ready to go fly. It's hard to believe it's a non-airworthy airplane that's going up on a static display.
With the restoration of the airplane nearly complete, major work began in the park to prepare for its installation.
Get a human dream.
Well, they had to design a pedestal to set the airplane on. So it's very important to know the exact weight of the airplane and the center of gravity. We had to know both of these because the support, the pedestal that the airplane sits on, has to be right over the center of gravity. Now the airplane has to be able to withstand 130-mile-an-hour wind, according to the zoning and permit requirements here in the state of Florida. So you had to know the weight, you had to know the center of gravity in order to build the foundation for the airplane to be mounted on. That foundation ended up weighing 430,000 pounds. We have 2 miles of rebar underneath the surface for that mount, hold that 22,000-pound airplane up there in that posture that it's at. It was a lot of engineering required to design the pedestal and the attachment to the aircraft to go together to give it that aggressive attitude that you see it has now. But we had to lift it in a manner that we could bank it and pitch it in order to hit the pedestal angle of pitch and bank. You had to be absolutely accurate as you lift the airplane and then put in the pitch and the bank angle in order for it to match up with the pedestals. The amazing thing is, you have to imagine a 30 degrees bank angle. Now you got a plate on the pedestal that has that angle. You have the same plate on the airplane with that angle. Now you got to take the airplane and drop it down on top of that pedestal. They did it the first time. They let that airplane down. The first attempt, they hit it perfect and matched them together. A phenomenal bit of professionalism on the part of the riggers that did it. I want to be remembered for this park because I'm hoping it's a field of dreams for the future kids and the future of our nation. All of us that were part of that project are very proud of it. It was just a phenomenal project working together, and the beauty of that airplane and the beauty of that site, we're all very proud of that.
Up next, the emotional celebration when the plane was dedicated, completing a dream of so many Central Floridians who have put in their time, talents, and money. Welcome back to Colonel Joe Kittinger Park near the Orlando Executive Airport. If you've driven by it on the 408, it's hard to miss, and that's just fine with Joe. He wants people to see it and remember the sacrifice made by those who fought in Vietnam. And that was his message at the plane's dedication ceremony.
Freedom has a taste for those who fight and almost die that the protected will never know. Soldiers know the meaning of freedom and the price it must be periodically paid to assure our way of life and democracy. So today we're going to welcome home troops from the Vietnam War by dedicating this war horse, F-4 Phantom Monument, in their honor for their service to our country. So for all of you Vietnam veterans out there, thanks for your service to our country and welcome home.
Hey! Congratulations, Joe.
And in closing, a big thank you to all those who made this dream a reality. And thank you to Colonel Joe Kittinger for his years of service and sacrifice for the red, white, and blue. Take care.